Hello and welcome to Bike Karma. In this YouTube-friendly episode segment, we're going to take a look at a cautionary tale for bike thieves, and you'll get a taste for what the podcast is like. Imagine that Car Talk and NPR, This American Life, all got together and had a very confused baby, kind of wandering alone by itself in the world, and all they talked about was bikes. That's what the Bike Karma podcast is. The format of the podcast is mostly an audio podcast right now, but it includes interviews, stories, skits, humor, and audio dramatizations like this one. It's about bringing all different kinds of people together who share an interest in bikes. All kinds, all styles, all vintages, all types of riding. If you're interested in bikes and open-minded, this is the podcast that's going to have something for you. And if you're curious about other camps of bikers, such as what is BMX all about, or what are fixie bikes all about, or what are those roadies doing that for, this is the podcast where you can learn and make connections with all those types of people, because at the end of the day, even though we separate into our different tribes, I believe that there's connections, that we all love cycling, and that's good. And we should celebrate that. So it's a celebration of all good things bike. This episode is a cautionary fairy tale for bike thieves. So I thought about how frustrating it is to have a bike get stolen. And I thought about what kind of story could be somewhat cathartic for that. And that's where this came from. So without further ado, please enjoy this. More information at end of the podcast about how to find other episodes as well as the full episode of this. Enjoy. Thanks for coming along for the ride.
Share all the knowledge and books there are to know. It's cutting down to the marrow.
The golden rule is to treat others the way you want to be treated. That means you don't steal other people's bikes. But people do. Sometimes it's just an impulse. You see a bike leaning on the side of a tree and somebody steals it. Other times, it's somebody who wakes up in the morning every day and goes out intending to steal bikes. Some bikes are even stolen to order. That's who this story is directed at. Not the person who temporarily has a bad day and makes a bad choice on impulse, but the person who wakes up every day and thinks that this is a great idea. So without further ado, here is a cautionary fairy tale to deter people from becoming bicycle thieves. Hope you like it. Our scene opens on a boy returning home after school. His dad opens the door and looks worried.
Hey, Dad.
Hey, your teacher called today.
Yeah, we had a career day at school. It was fun.
Yeah, that's what she wanted to talk to me about. She said you walked around all day stuck on one particular idea for your future career?
Yep, I picked up a good one.
Well, that's debatable. In case she got it wrong, tell me what career you chose.
Bike thief, bike thief, bike thief, bike thief, bike thief. Dad, I want to be a bike thief. And not only that, I think I'd be really good at it.
What now? Why would you want to do that? Bike thieves, the professional ones who go out every day to steal bikes, are some of the most hated people in the world.
Well, haters gonna hate.
But why would you pick a job, a career path that is morally wrong and hurts so many people's feelings? Why?
Well, Dad, it's all about risk to reward. Gotta risk it for the biscuit, Dad. The odds of me paying back a college loan for some random career based on one of my interests is a gamble. Bike thievery is easy, especially if you have an angle grinder. You almost never get caught, and even when you do get caught, the conviction rate is almost non-existent. It's a no-brainer.
Wait, what about all the people you'd hurt? I mean, deeply hurt. People love their bikes. Taking someone's bike is kind of like taking someone's horse in the last century.
Look, Dad, an amateur would take any old mutt of a bike. I'd be a pro. The people who can afford $3,000 bike and a $200 lock can afford to take the hit.
I can't believe you're talking like this. Take the hit? Look, this isn't how your mom and I raised you.
Look, Dad, income for a bike thief in a major city, if you're willing to work, is comparable to that of a starting teacher or a nurse's aide. I'd have a middle-class lifestyle and be able to support all of those charities that you and Mom do.
This is just so wrong, though. I think I'm gonna have to pull out the big guns, dude. Remember the stories I used to tell you when you were little?
Goodnight Moon?
No, the other ones.
Oh, you mean the fairy tales.
Yeah, the Cautionary Fairy Tales.
Dad, I'm almost a teenager.
I know, but you learned a lot from those stories. Look, do you go around rubbing strange-looking lamps?
No.
Do you ever eat candy houses in the woods?
No.
Can you tell the difference between your grandmother and a wolf dressed up in Coldwater Creek clothing?
Yes.
So I guess they did teach you a lesson, huh?
Yeah, you're right.
And I guess I gotta include one more cautionary tale.
Yeah.
The cautionary fairy tale of what happens to bike thieves. Once upon a time in your very favorite city. Everyone is born a bit different. 45 was the nickname of a professional bike thief in a story. It was given to him when he lost a bet that he could grind through a certain U-lock in 30 seconds, but it actually took him 15 seconds longer. You would totally look past him in a crowd, but having him pointed out to you, you would start to notice how many layers had gone into his working outfit. Looking even more closely, you would see he had a microfleece hat underneath his ball cap. A contrasting jacket was carefully hidden beneath his hoodie, and even his snap-up basketball pants were hiding a pair of jeans underneath. He was a master of changing his looks quickly. He practiced at home, so that in the street, either turning around the corner or ducking into a coffee shop after a thwarted theft, he would re-emerge in seconds looking like a totally different person. He even had fake glasses he would put on that would totally mess with the recognition skills of any adrenaline-pumped pursuer. He could ditch the extra clothes in the garbage or in his backpack. Nothing he wore had any personal connection or value to him. This was his work outfit, and it was disposable. He had several different looks, none of which he wore when he was off duty. He didn't steal for drugs, he stole to pay for his life, the rent, to buy nice things. Somewhat antisocial, 45's downtime was to play video games, interacting with people online who didn't ask too many questions. The people he did meet and interacted with, and only when he really needed to, would have said there wasn't anything quirky about him other than his total lack of quirks. He mimicked the response of others, like people who smile at jokes even when in their eyes you could see that they didn't get it. He never stole a bike without a plan. He had 3 small storage units spread out in different parts of the city. He changed and rotated them often. He even had a few bikes that were not stolen. They were legit. He could take them out in public without risk. These were props like his clothes. They could be camouflaged while doing reconnaissance in an area, and he could also use them as bait to obtain customers at pop-up flea market and street markets around the city. He would have the nice, not stolen bikes out for sale as bait, and a customer would come up. He'd strike up a conversation and was a master at prying out of a person exactly what bike they were looking for, size, model, color, you name it. He wasn't especially personable or friendly, but he worked every trick of hustlers to keep his marks talking. Once he got them to tell him exactly what bike they wanted and how much they wanted to pay for it, he'd suddenly seem to remember that he had one just like that, or maybe even a little better back home, but he didn't bring it with him that day. If the person left a phone number, he'd call them the next day or two and bring it around to them. He told them they could meet at a park or something, so that they didn't have to worry about him knowing where they lived. He made sure to make it sound like it was for their protecting. But the real reason is they wouldn't know where to find him afterwards. Well, that seems sketchy to me and you. People are great at what's called suspending their disbelief when they want something, and the price he'd quote them would be irresistibly tantalizing. A flea market was just starting one Sunday morning when he was attempting to get ready for the exact setup that we've just talked about. That's how he met Mr. Vins. Mr. Vins was a man in his 40s that looked more like a hipster bartender than a cyclist. He stood out in a crowd, roundish pewter glasses, handlebar mustache, well dressed in sort of a steampunk fashion. His clothing was modern interpretation of a casual vest and dark tweed coat from times past. You might see someone like Mr. Vins at an art show or a small theater producing something really artsy. On closer examination, you could tell that the guy had money. His mustache was immaculate and precise. His clothes were custom tailored and of a high quality. Even his glasses had decorative yet subtle metalwork crafted into them that pronounced to the world that this man is quirky, but he has a lot of dough. A well-trained predator like 45, who this time introduced himself as Mike, saw him as a prime mark. What 45 missed, or maybe ignored, because as with most professional bike thieves he lacked empathy, was a resigned sadness in Mr. Vin's eyes. If you were to have dinner with Mr. Vin's, you would find more in his eyes than that. Beyond a short meeting, you would start to become unnerved by what could only be described as a dark spark deep in his pupils. We can forgive 45, aka Mike, for missing that in his very brief encounter.
Hello, I am looking for a vintage-styled but newer bespoke 10-speed.
Mike brought out a mid-range 10-speed from the 4 bikes he had with him, using every trick of body language he had mastered, not to offer it for sale, but to use it as a prop to keep the mock talking.
Like this one with the drop racing bars? But, obviously a higher quality hand-built model. What brand exactly were you looking for, or what vintage?
The quick follow-up questions made sure the man didn't dismiss the bike and walk away, but kept talking and giving details about the bike he was looking for.
I'm not sure of the brand, but it is certainly quality. The lugwork is very ornate. The geometry is sublime. It is certainly a small craft builder of some type. I have seen a few of them around the Kendall cul-de-sac on the east side. Perhaps the frame builder works around there. The only markings on the ones I saw were the head badge and the top tube of the bike. It had no branding other than that. Yeah, well, sometimes they do that on high-end, low-production number bikes to keep the clean lines and look. What would the head badge look like? Well, the head badge is a broken heart. I've tried to find the brand so far, but I am unsuccessful. No shops have proven to be helpful. If I am to only have one bicycle, I want it to be this kind. If you can help me secure one in my size, I will not only reimburse you the full retail price, but also give you a generous finder's fee. Yeah, sure. I've heard that brand somewhere before. It may take a couple days to remember where I had seen that particular one.
Mr. Vince closed his eyes, nodding.
Yes, that's understood. Of course. Here's my card.
The card was simple and uncluttered, but screamed class and quality. It simply said Mr. Vince and a cell phone number. 45 thought it was a folding card at first that would open and reveal more, but it was only a $100 bill that had been folded behind it.
I look forward to hearing from you soon.
45 stared as Mr. Vince turned away, amazed at the mark that had fallen into his pocket. It was only as Mr. Vince turned a corner that he realized his mouth was hanging open. 45 laughed despite himself. He would have to work a year searching for a mark as good as this one. Price seemed no object, and this guy even told him where to find him. Good thing too, because he had never seen that brand before. For a moment, a thought that the man might be part of a sting operation came into his head. It was kind of perfect, but quickly the details about his appearance flooded back, and each one was so precise and immaculate he knew no undercover cop could have pulled it off. Just the tailored jacket alone would have been a whole paycheck for a detective. Panic actually did grip his mind, though, as he realized he hadn't gotten the man's frame size. He could guess and was really good at that, but what if he blew this whole deal by stealing the wrong size? The card dropped from his hand and landed face down. As he dove to catch his only connection to the lucrative deal, he saw on the back was written 58 centimeters, the frame size. Below that were 3 colors, maroon, white gold, or pewter. All this was written in sharp script from a fountain pen. Mr. Vin certainly was focused and knew what he wanted. This one deal could set him for a month, maybe 2. He could be ahead on his rent or even move. He could rent the truck and get a new storage locker. He never liked to stay in one place too long. The newer the storage facility, especially the ones that just opened, the longer the heat would be off for at that location. Police usually like to look for established facilities and networks, which is how he stayed a step ahead, always looking for the next place instead of staying too long at the last. He packed up. This was by far the best lead he was going to get, and he wasn't going to let it slip away. Later, he searched online. He knew hundreds of brands, makes, and styles, knew their MSRPs and their street values. He knew how to change one part on a bike that would go unnoticed by a nervous buyer until they got home. And when he later sold that one part online, he would increase his profit by hundreds. He searched all the bespoke and frame builder blogs, but this brand did not come up. He found many custom-made heart badges on Instagram, but none of them was connected with a certain brand. After 3 long hours of frustration, he began to panic, thinking he would lose the mark. Then he stumbled onto Broken Heart Cycles. The webpage was minimal. The shop made only 20 or so bikes a year, and you even had to apply for one to be built for you. When he clicked on the About tab, he saw a close-up of the head tube badge. It was a broken heart with the words "please" written on one half and the word "don't" written on the other. Below that, it said the frame maker and bike building teams prefer their privacy and would rather have their bikes speak for themselves. 45 rolled his eyes. Precious, he thought. And pretentious, he muttered. No prices were listed, of course. Going to eBay, he typed in Broken Heart Cycles. Nothing. He clicked on advanced settings and looked at completed sales. 1 hit only. An ornate and artistic-looking mixed-D frame was the only result. It was a distinctive-looking bike, he had to admit. Somehow it managed to look classic and reimagined at the same time. Lines curved in slightly unexpected ways, but ended at immaculate custom lug work. A high-end machine for sure. He looked at the price. It was listed for $7,000, but beneath it had said "best offer accepted." "Damn," he said aloud. It made sense to him that a few of this brand of bike would be in one neighborhood. People talk to each other, seeing a bike like that will make other people jelly and want it. Then all of a sudden you have a club of riders who all go to the park, and on Sunday they ride around together showing off. He would go check out the neighborhood Mr. Vince had mentioned to him to do some recon. The neighborhood was nice but young. He saw a lot of younger couples but not many kids. He noted the bikes were very boutiquey. Too bad he couldn't steal for quantity in this neighborhood. The bikes he saw had expensive locks, but the bikes themselves were not just vintage, they were quality vintage. Instead of just an old steel Raleigh, there was a rare Carlton-made frame. Not just an older British 3-speed, there was a handmade Pashley Sovereign that was chained to a fence and had 3 locks on it. The Brooks seat alone would be worth a $100 bill all day long for a quick snip and a few turns of an Allen wrench. It seems every lock style he had ever seen on Kickstarter was here. Titanium locks, U-locks, folding locks, locks that were part of the seat, it didn't matter. If he brought his oversized insulated hoodie, he could use his battery-powered angle grinder and cut through them all. The hoodie would hide the sparks and deaden the noise, as would a well-placed backpack or shopping bag. He would look like he was unlocking his bike to the casual observer. If someone got closer, it wouldn't matter anyway, because he'd be gone in less than a minute or two. The angle grinder hung under his hoodie on a neck strap, just a slight bulge to anyone walking past. As he was walking, he turned a corner into a cul-de-sac and saw it. On the sleeve of his jacket, he had cleverly placed Sharpie marker lines he used to check frame sizes as he knelt to tie his shoe. It looked close to a 57.5 because he couldn't put his body right next to it, but it was probably close enough to a 58. And it was maroon red. Red was good news and bad news. Good news because it was the color that the customer wanted, but bad news because it was flashy and catch his attention. Red is risky, he learned early on. Red stands out. He quickly got up from tying his shoe and kept walking. In his phone, he marked the location and time. A few houses down, he saw a green one. It was a smaller frame, though. It was behind the gate of a small garden area in front of a walk-up. The owner for this one wasn't taking any chances. There were 2 beefy NYC-rated yellow and black U-locks and a chain that looked like it came off of a battleship bolted to some wrought iron something or other. Undoubtedly, the person took it in at night, but this was the setup they used when they knew they were going back out at night that day. That makes 2, and the only 2 he had ever seen in his life. He saw no more. He walked home to his apartment, noting a couple of other bikes on the way, but mostly preoccupied with how much he would be able to ask Mr. Vince for without scaring him off. He went back dressed differently the next day. Once early in the morning and again in the evening. The cul-de-sac was bikeless in the morning visit. He had expected that. These expensive bikes went indoors at night. In the early evening, only a couple of bikes were out. Those who planned to go out on errands before bed, he told himself. Even they were secure. 1 or 2 had titanium locks. Discouraging for amateur thieves, he smiled, but not for me. He knew cyclists tended to be creatures of habit. If a cyclist finds a convenient space to lock up their ride and it doesn't get stolen, they will often return to that same place again and again. 2 days later he would return. If it was there, he would lift it then. He mapped out a route to get to his storage locker. He didn't like the red, so along the route he had stuffed a few paper towel rolls, splitting them lengthwise, creating a temporary camouflage. People would think he was odd or worried about scratching his bike, but much of the bright and shiny red would be masked by flat, light-absorbing brown of the cardboard. He stashed them 2 miles away down a side street with a few windows only behind the dumpster. As soon as he slipped on those, he could breathe easier. The day finally came. He made his way to the neighborhood. He watched from far across the street. Yes, the bike was there. He knew confidence was camouflage. Rookies and drug addicts walked closely past before awkwardly turning and returning to steal the bike, drawing lots of attention. He knew he had one shot to walk right up to it as if it was his. If he looked confident, and as if he owned the bike, it could be his. He was really proud of another trademark touch of his, which was to put a water bottle next to him. He put a water bottle conspicuously beside him. As suspicious passers-by weighed up the situations, they would think to themselves, what thief would have a bottle of water? That must be his bike. He put the bottle in his backpack down. He looked at the lock. It was good. Probably cost $100, but was no match for the angle grinder with a diamond cutting wheel. He was through it in 40 seconds. He let the grinder fall hanging from a net strap under his oversized hoodie and puffy coat. His outfit was a perfect disguise. As he bent to pick up the water bottle, he glanced at the head badge. He actually heard the words out loud as he read them.
Please don't.
Please don't. The words were engraved in the 2 silver broken heart halves that he looked at online. He blinked, a little shaken, but he couldn't stop. To stop now would be deadly. He put his foot over, adjusted his backpack, and pedaled as fast as one could without drawing attention for being too fast. He heard the words a couple more times as he turned a corner.
Please don't. Please don't.
The red color was bright and it was making him nervous. Even though it was going from partly cloudy to overcast, the wind was picking up. He needed to slap those cardboard tubes on soon. The pre-applied double-sided tape would hold them on well, even in this wind. He rolled towards the lonely street ahead. As he started to turn into it, he noticed for the first time and the last time that he couldn't free his hands from the bars. What happened next happened so quickly, he didn't even have a chance to scream. He tried desperately to pull his hands away from the bike, but they just melted further into the grips. He couldn't see where his hands stopped and the grips began. His legs were pulled towards the seat stays and stuck to the frame, and his feet were pulled backwards towards the axles, and they started melting into him. His spine arched downward and was pulled into the top tube. His arms stretched and bent as his face was pulled towards the stem and head tube. His forearms stretched and became one with the forks, and his shoulders were absorbed into the handlebars. If anyone had seen this, it would have seemed that he had become one with the bike, and while the bike looked basically the same now, the rider had totally disappeared. The bike carried on for a curiously long time. Riderless, it somehow stayed balanced for almost 100 feet before anticlimactically and calmly coming to a stop, falling gently onto its side.
There it sat, innocently laying undamaged on the side. A few drops of rain began to fall. Other than that, there was stillness. A few minutes later, a hand reached down to pick up the bike. Ah, I see you found one for me. He righted the bicycle and dusted off a very slight scuff on the bar tape from the fall. He looked down at the head badge and stared intently at the 2 silver broken heart halves. The words please and don't had been replaced with 2 simply engraved eyes. Mr. Vince looked directly into those eyes. Even though they didn't move, they conveyed anger, fear, and confusion. Mr. Vince sighed. Bittersweet feelings right now. It always is. I don't